So I was just getting different pieces of your life, which I didn't know. So I was curious. Maybe we could start there.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I guess kind of initial question is like, what were you like when you were young, and what did you want to be when you grew up?
All right. When I was a kid, I had really severe ODD, which means I'm odd. And I was very odd. And my first memory was,
Odd shows up in, how does odd show up?
Well, I mean, one of the things I'm going to share is I was constantly aware of how adults were not in their heart and not connecting and not in a place of love. And I'm like, why doesn't everybody just love each other? And it was very disturbing to me, and it was very isolating ultimately. And I turned inward, and I had a very isolated childhood and spent a lot of time reading. And I read crazy stuff that I don't even know why I read now. I studied, civil rights and Martin Luther King and Gandhi and Thoreau and environmental science and, just kind of put my head around things that were really quite different. And then I sort of wandered into, Asian religions and really focused on that. And, what did I want to do when I grew up? I had no idea.
Something different.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I read a lot of Jack Kerouac, which was heavily influenced by Buddhism, and wanted to travel the world and see everything. And, as Thoreau said, suck the marrow out of life. But other than that, I didn't have a big plan.
Right.
Maybe to write about it.
But you studied Buddhism in college, though, is that?
Yeah.
You graduated with a degree in Buddhism?
Well, by accident. You know how it goes in college. First day of college, you're sitting down with everybody, you're talking about what's going on. And this sophomore was like, well, he's this great professor, and he's French, lived in Japan, and is teaching this amazing class. You should take this class. I'm like, all right. So I dropped whatever I had started, and I took this class, and ended up taking every class that he ever taught, and then other classes in Buddhism. And basically, when I got to be a junior, they're like, you have to have a major. And I'm like, I do? Okay. So they're like, well, you have a lot of Asian studies credits. I'm like, all right. And then they have to take a language. I'm like, oh, okay. And I picked Chinese. I figured 1 billion people speak it. It couldn't go wrong. So yeah, and then I began to really think about, Buddhism and what it is. It's not a religion. It's a description of the mind and experience and how we perceive things and how that creates suffering and how to actually undo that. And it's ultimately a powerful healing art, and it's about healing the mind and in turn healing the body. And all the Tibetan Buddhists, who, to be a doctor, you had to be a monk. And so I studied the medicine Buddha, and I became sort of enamored with the idea of healing and Buddhism, and it all sort of got in this mushy spot, and I graduated with a degree in Buddhism, speaking Chinese, not knowing.
Lots of jobs for that.
Yeah, I was like, So I spent a week hiking and reading Moby Dick, and I just was like up in the backcountry, and I decided, well, I'll try to go to medical school and see if I like it, and if I get in, and if I don't like it, I'll quit. And so far, so good.
So you go to medical school, and can you tell us a little bit about the story? Because you're not your average doctor, and we'll get into some of that. But was there an awakening health experience that you had, or was it a wide variety of things that?
Well, I kind of went in, like subversive, right? So I actually was a yoga teacher before I was a doctor, 40 years ago, when yoga was really weird, and there was one yoga studio in New York City above the East West Bookstore, which is now Hugh Kitchen on 14th and 5th Avenue. And it was weird. There were like 3 people in the class, and and so I always sort of brought that into medical school with me, the understanding. I studied ancient healing systems. I studied the theoretical aspects of Chinese medicine and ancient healing traditions around the world, planet medicine. That was sort of embedded in me in college. And then I went to medical school and sort of tried to hold my ground. And I think I kept it, but I slowly got brainwashed into that paradigm. And it was tough. And I felt like I was doing a good job. And I think I was a good doctor. I was a family doctor. I went to a small town in Idaho and practiced there for a number of years and delivered babies and did everything. And then I kind of left and went to China for a year, came back, worked in the ER, and then I decided I wanted to do more, mind-body medicine and integrative medicine. And I got a job as the medical director of Canyon Ranch, which is where I began to sort of do all this. And really, like a few months after I got that job, I got really sick. And it went from like riding my bike 100 miles a day and, remembering 30 patients in a day, seeing them without any notes and being able to do the charts, to not being able to walk up the stairs and not knowing where I was at the end of a sentence. And everything broke down. My gut broke down, my immune system broke down, my brain broke down. I couldn't focus, think, I couldn't sleep. And I'm just getting over a cold. Haven't found the cure for that yet. And I was giving a talk at a conference yesterday on Alzheimer's and autism. I said, we can cure Alzheimer's and autism, but I can't figure out how to cure the common cold yet. So I literally had to sort of reverse engineer my way back to health. And at that point, functional medicine was a very unknown and really fairly undeveloped discipline. And I discovered I had mercury poisoning from living in China. And it just broke down everything in my system. And I literally had to go system by system, fixing everything: my gut, my mitochondria, my brain, my immune system, my hormones. And it took a long time. And through that process, and then applying that to my patients and seeing the results and having this amazing incubator where, I was able to work with very wealthy people who could do all the diagnostics. We could explore together. I was very open with them and saying, let's just try this. Nothing else works. And people would have miracles. We literally see people wake up from Alzheimer's, or people reverse autism, or people with autoimmune diseases that were untreatable get cured, or depression go away, or all sorts of things. And so that process led me to just become passionate about sharing this model of medicine with the world, because it just, to me, it was a paradigm shift. It's like saying, okay, well, the earth isn't flat anymore. And yet everybody around you is like, the earth is flat. What are you talking about? Yeah. And it's like living in a different reality. Yeah. What's exciting now is 20 plus years later, now it's starting to become in the conversation. People are aware of it. People know about it. And people are, I was in Abu Dhabi a couple of weeks ago with Cleveland Clinic program there, and the whole royal family's into it. You hear people really becoming aware and looking for this. So it was a hard journey, but it led me to be really passionate advocate about having to share this with the world and write about it and teach about it.
Oh, great. And I know you had another medical or challenge recently.
That's been my...
that was... I don't know if you've spoken about it publicly.
No, I have. That's been sort of my path, is essentially having to learn by getting sick and figuring it out and then telling everyone, which I don't recommend. Not fun. But I was... I had a house, an old barn I lived in. It was from 1800s, and it was full of mold, and didn't realize it, and I started coughing and getting sick and tired, and then a bunch of things happened where I got a root canal that went bad and took an antibiotic, and then I broke my arm, and it all happened within like 3 weeks. And I ended up going into massive physical collapse. I got C. diff, which is a horrible intestinal infection from antibiotics. I lost 30 pounds from my already skinny ass self here. And I was in bed for 5 months. Even when I was really sick with chronic fatigue, I didn't have that. I was literally just could not function. I had no cognitive function. I couldn't be on the phone or answer emails. I was in bed back and forth to the bathroom. I developed colitis, gastritis, severe pain 24/7, severe cognitive dysfunction. And I literally, there was like nothing left of me emotionally, physically, mentally. And it was kind of an interesting experience because, all the years of yoga, meditation, and Buddhist training, sort of, I knew intellectually that I'm not my thoughts, I'm not my emotions, I'm not my behaviors, I'm not all of that, I'm not my physical body. But like when you're in it, it's like, but I just surrendered, and I just was in this very peaceful place. I didn't know if I was going to die or not. I thought I was a number of times. And it was a very profound experience for me because I literally just had to be in, and I was actually happy. My wife was here, who really was there for me the whole time. And it was striking, like how I was able to sort of not fall into despair or darkness or fear, but just be in whatever it was that was happening, which I don't recommend. But I finally figured out how to fix it. And all my usual tricks didn't work. So I had to think of another set of tricks which did work, which was kind of fun.
Well, because I wonder how you see yourself as a physician and also knowing, I think Lao Tzu has a quote, but the Buddha has that quote, better than to live 100 years unaware is 1 moment or 1 minute or 1 second of awareness.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious how you balance that in your practice where, yes, we can help this person heal and they can live another 10 years miserably.
Right.
or there's that moment of awareness too that's like, wow, I might have less time, but I'm present with that time. And I'm curious how that integrates in your personal life, and also how do you integrate that in your practice, and how you see that awakening, so it's both healing the body, but there's also healing of the heart and the spirit.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
I mean, I think, different people respond differently to being sick. And, for me, the gift of that period was sort of refocusing on what really mattered to me and where I put my time and my energy and my love and my commitment. And it really changed me, and I shifted things around in my life. I created more space. I created more time. I created more focus on the things that really mattered. There's so much noise in our life of things that don't really matter, that suck our energy. And I was like, okay, what really matters? And that really was powerful for me. And for patients, I think, I always sort of drop into a place of trying to really drop into their experience with them and what it's like, and try to help them understand their beliefs and their challenges around getting better or not getting better. I mean, the Buddhists talk about different types of illness. There's things that happen from early life influences. There's things that happen from karma. There's spiritual illnesses, and so you can have the same disease, and it can be any one of those things, right? And I think that's a sort of interesting frame. It doesn't matter what the disease is; it's like what the cause is.
Yeah. And how do you help someone at all those different levels?
Yeah.
Whether it's
I always joke, I say, whatever works, I use it, whether it's exercise or exorcism. Sometimes they do need exorcism.
And how do you see yourself, because I think a lot of people know you as, the doctor that helps people understand what to eat and what not to eat, and latest research and science and alternative practices. How is that still kind of what inspires you? Is there something else that you feel like you want to bring to the culture's attention and awareness?
It's an evolution, So there's a few things that's happened to me, and all the things that really I think impact us or that shape us, we don't choose. Like they choose us, and the root cause thinking is foundational for functional medicine. So, I spent years, decades studying biochemistry and physiology and genetics and the gut microbiome and all this immune system, and just getting into the weeds on it and all the molecular pathways and kind of nerdy stuff. And then, people would get better when I would do that, but there were people who wouldn't necessarily change their behavior, which they needed to do. And then, one day I read this book, which was given to me by a shaman, called Mountains Beyond Mountains, and about Paul Farmer in Haiti and how he cured TB and AIDS not through better drugs or surgery, but by using the power of community. He called it accompaniment. We accompany each other to health, this peer support, community health worker model. And so I was very inspired, and I wanted to reach out to him and talk to him, and I reached out to a friend who knew him and said, yeah, I'll connect you. And then boom, the next day the earthquake happened.
Wow.
And I had just finished reading a book about Haiti, and I was like, I should go. And of course, there's no way to go because the airport's down, there's no flights. And one of my patients sends me an email. I'm working with patients, and I get an email pops up, and it's like, want to go to Haiti today? And I'm normally today, and I normally would ignore it because but this guy had a Gulfstream 5. He's a billionaire, and
you could figure out how to get there.
I'm like, all right. He says, put together a team. So we put together a team. I went down there, and I brought Paul Farmer with me. I called him up and brought him with me, and got to know him, and got to see what was happening in Haiti, and understood the power of, even there, the level of chronic disease was striking to me. And I decided after that chronic disease is really a social disease. Just like infectious disease is often driven by the social determinants. And Paul Farmer calls them a structural violence, the social, economic, and political conditions that drive disease. But it's true not for infectious disease only, but also for chronic disease. And we know that your zip code is far more important determinant of your health than your genetic code.
Wow.
And in fact, you take someone who's diabetic and obese from a very poor, low socioeconomic area to a slightly better one, and their blood sugar and their weight goes down independent of any medical care. which is pretty profound. And so I began to think about this, and I realized that we needed to build the same model for chronic disease, which was peer support, community, connection, love, called the love diet, And so, as serendipity would happen, or synchronicity, I got, this guy walked in my office, Rick Warren, who's a faith pastor in Southern California, wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. And he was very
popular, yeah.
What?
Hugely popular.
Yeah, it was like the second best-selling book, nonfiction, except for the Bible, basically. And he had put 10 million people in groups around the world to study purpose and help people learn about living a purposeful life. And he was very overweight, he was very sick, and I took care of him. Then we went out to dinner. And I said, tell me about your church. He was like, yeah, well, I got this 30,000 member church. I'm like, wow. He said, we have 5,000 groups to meet every week to help each other live better lives. I'm like, whoa. This isn't a mega church, it's thousands of mini churches. I said, why don't we put a healthy living program? And he's like, yeah, okay, great, because last week I was baptizing my church, and after like the 800th one, I'm like, man, we're a fat church. and I'm fat, and I'm not a very spiritual thought, but so we launched this program. We thought a few hundred people would come. 15,000 people showed up. It was the biggest thing they'd ever had on campus. They turned 2,000 people away. In the course of a year, they lost 250,000 pounds. They did it together, supporting each other. There was no doctor, health coach, nutritionist, nothing. It was just them with a curriculum driven by functional medicine. And we wrote a book called The Daniel Plan, which was the #1 New York Times bestseller. I wanted to call it The Jewish Doctor's Guide for Christian Wellness. Didn't work out.
Yeah, I can see how
we did win the Christian Book of the Year award. I'm the only Jewish guy to ever win that. But there was one other guy maybe 2,000 years ago. But
yeah.
So,
every 2,000 years.
Yeah, So the point of that is that I've spent a lot of time now focusing on changing the environment in which we live in. Yeah. The social drivers, the community aspects, the isolation, the social cultural patterns that drive disease. And a lot of it has to do with our food system, which drives so much. So other than the community-based models that we're working on, I'm also really focusing on the food system because, if chronic disease is caused by food, well, what causes the food? It's the food system. Well, what causes the food system? Well, it's the food policies that we have and the corporations that produce the food. So I began to really look deeply at what are the drivers of our disturbed food system, and what are the consequences of it? So my next book is going to be called Food Fix, something like saving our health, our communities, our climate, and our economy. And the idea is that everything's connected to food. If you look at chronic disease, obviously, we have more than 1 in 2 people with a chronic illness. It's 85% of our healthcare costs, mostly preventable. It causes social injustice through perpetuation of poverty, learning challenges in kids. Yes, mindfulness is great, but if kids are sucking back soda and eating Doritos, it's going to be hard for them to say, sit still and meditate, And then it affects climate. Paul Hawken just gave a talk a few days ago about how the food sector is one of the biggest contributors to climate change, and also biggest solution, not to mention environmental degradation, national security issues. Kids are too fat to fight. We reject 70% of our recruits, and even poverty, the cycle of poverty, what people eat. So it's all connected. And so for me, my focus is really how do we change that food system? How do we change the food policies? How do we work? And it's maybe it's a Don Quixote at the windmill here, but I got to do what I got to do.
Yeah. But you're more interested in the systematic, larger systematic, not just the individual and what they can do, but how does the system either support health or support disease?
There was a fascinating article in the New York Times today about Virchow, who was a doctor in the 1800s when they had these infectious plagues, and he essentially wrote about the politics of medicine, which is the diseases that were coming out of these communities were poor communities where they had no sanitation, no clean water, where they were really challenged, and that was the source of the illnesses that we're seeing. And the same thing is happening today, and that we should, as doctors, as healthcare providers, as healthcare system, we should be advocating for changes in the social structure, for changes in the social system, and that we should all vote. Tim didn't say it, but
Yeah, and the poor are often hit hardest. They're the ones that there's the least available nutritious, healthy food for.
34% of us are overweight, but 48% of African Americans and 43% of Hispanics are not overweight, obese.
And so what are some of the, if we were to have a magic wand, like what are some things that would, some things that would support that?
Well, my wife and I are going to an event soon, and we have to dress up as magicians. So I'm getting this big staff, and if I had a magic staff, I think there are a number of really important policy changes that could shift things. One is we need to stop subsidizing commodities that cause disease that can turn into processed food, basically wheat, corn, and soy, which 60% of our diet is that. We need to stop the SNAP program, which provides $85 billion a year. The Farm Bill is essentially could be called the food stamp bill. It's a $1 trillion bill, and about $800 billion is food stamps, and it's about $85 billion a year for food stamps. And that produces enormous amounts of illness through soda consumption and junk food, which is most of it. We need to change food marketing so we don't allow kids to see junk food ads and put warning labels like cigarettes on food that's bad for you. I think we can change food labeling so it's clear to people know what they're eating now. It's super confusing. We need to get all food that's not supporting or promoting health out of schools and public institutions and organizations that the government funds. So there's a number of things that could happen. Taxation strategies are out there. There's debate about that. But I was just in Abu Dhabi, and it's an autocracy there. They have no financial conflicts of interest. They do whatever they want, and they have all the money to do whatever they want.
We're moving slightly in that world here, but okay.
Yeah,
but there's
although the incentives are not, though all their money comes from oil, they don't tax, there's no taxes.
Wow.
There's zero taxes. Everything gets paid for, they get a stipend, the Emiratis, it's pretty wild. So they have 75% of them are overweight. We have 1 in 10 in diabetic, they have 1 in 4 to 1 in 3 diabetics in their country. And they just put in a 50% soda tax and 100% energy drink tax. Wow. And they saw consumption drop dramatically. In fact, the finance minister of Austria called the guy who runs the thing, and he said, "What are you doing? Our sales went down 70%. I'm like, he's like, you can't do that. I'm like, we did. So I think we need, and that there are projects maybe outside of America where things can really change and collect data. So I'm working on that too.
Great, wow. And I'm curious, in your experience of that illness recently, what are some of the takeaways that you feel like, is it a lot of it being like Mark, simplify, or what
on a personal level?
Yeah.
It was, there's always so many demands on us, right? And my personality is to say yes and help everybody and do everything. And I realized that wasn't helpful for me or even the bigger things that I wanted to see changing. So it really decided two things. One, I need to scale back the number of things I was doing and focus on the important things.
And this is one of those important things.
Yeah.
The system.
Yeah, systems change. And really also just be much more present and connected every day. And like just be in, I don't know the word, but like be in the flow of everything and not worry about anything.
Yeah.
It's like, that Bobby McFerrin song, "Don't Worry, Be Happy." It's sort of like that. Like, what else could happen to me? Like, so I feel like I'm really blessed, and I feel like I just treasure every day, every moment, and really focus on my relationship with my friends and my wife, and that's the most important thing to me. I mean, I feel like, and it allows me to show up and do everything else I do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And is there anything that we haven't touched on that feels important to touch on?
I don't know. Well, it's interesting. I started meditating when I was like 15 in like 1975, and with TM, my sister dated a guy who was a TM teacher. She called him a bliss ninny. But
this isn't. Were you in New York at the time, or?
She was at Amherst, and I thought we were somewhere. And I did it for a long time. I did yoga, meditation, but then I sort of went through a phase where I didn't. And I always did yoga and was in nature a lot, but it didn't. And a number of years ago, I started to do a regular practice of twice-a-day meditation, and it really sort of became clear to me that, it's like exercise. You kind of have to do it in order to get the ability to be present in your life in a way that really works. And I think, for me, it's all about what are those things you need to do to create a container that can be fully expressed in whoever you are. How do you, eat and do all the things that, like, what's the end? It's not just to eat to be healthy. It's so you can be of service in the world. So you can serve the purpose that you have or the work you want to do, or show up and be fully connected. You can be with your partner in a loving way. You can be present with your kids. You can be present at work. You can actually find joy and connection and love and light. That's what it's about, right? All the rest doesn't really matter.
Right.
And so for me, having that kind of re-entry into a regular meditation practice has really changed so much for me about the quality of my experience and the quality of every day and just my happiness. I mean, Dan's coming tomorrow. I know him. He's pretty funny, but he's like...
Dan Harris, yeah.
Yeah, 10% happier. I'm like, I gave him a copy of my book, 10-Day Detox. I said, Dan, you do this, you'll be 20% happier. So,
no, but it's an interesting balance between the health, which, like you said, but then just being healthy and having a miserable life isn't necessarily.
No.
But there's that awareness piece, right? Which sounds like that was kind of reignited in you. It's always been there, but it also is kind of like highlighted. And I think there's a sweetness to honoring both.
Yeah, and everybody here knows that's why you're here, but it's powerful.
Yeah, is it?
It's very powerful, and it's not something you can like read about. You know,
Right.
you have to do it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. And I appreciate hearing the larger story of her life, because I think if it's easy to see somebody, I think, and I just have this picture of, oh, they're this, right? Like they're always healthy, they're always present, they've always written really great books.
Yeah.
And you actually realize, like, more and true of us, like the suffering and the challenges, there's no way around that, whether it's karmic or who knows where it comes from, as you said. And I appreciate your transparency in your own
well, it's
life.
what happens. It's what you do with the suffering, right? Like we all have suffering, so we can either be in the story of it, or we can have it be the foundation of wisdom and just thoughtfulness and awakening.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Awesome. Thank you.